The thinking was that it happened quite suddenly, that dinosaurs were superior, that there was something about them, that once they originated, they had such a advanced biology and advanced type of body that they spread all around the world, that they spread around almost like an infectious virus, that they outcompeted the other animals of the day way back in the Triassic period, the days of the supercontinent Pangaea. But we now know that's not the case. There have been so many new fossil discoveries over the last decade or so, fossils of the very first dinosaurs, the animals living with the first dinosaurs.
If you're, as a patient, approaching the clinic, you're visiting with your doctor, you've had, a specific set of lab tests, and you're wondering, do you have a particular diagnosis or not? Are you going to respond to a drug in poorly or not? Or is this going to be have a secondary effect because of some other comorbidity you have? Now, what's possible is that you can look at data from millions of patients who came before you and watch what happened to them over time in response to similar therapies that were given, or to observe what was done to them and how they reacted, to figure out exactly what is the right thing to do for
people were so afraid of using federal funds to sponsor the kind of research that a certain subset of the population would find objectionable. The government basically abrogated all responsibility in IVF research. They basically said, we're not going to use federal funds to support any research involving human embryos and fetuses. So what resulted from that was that IVF still continued to be investigated, but it became kind of a cowboy science. It was something that was funded by private people who were funding, just sort of the marketplace of fertility clinics, and there was no regulation. If there had been federal funds for research grants, then there would have been certain restrictions on federal funding, and also would have been an opportunity for the scientists to actually talk to each other. When people get NIH grants, they often have conferences and they have, some sort of public forum in which they describe some of the things they've been learning. But this put everything sort of under the radar and back into the private marketplace, which was not necessarily good for this kind of research.
Today, we are seeing hundreds of years of scientific discovery being challenged by people who simply disregard facts that don't happen to agree with their agenda. Some call it pseudoscience, others call it faith-based science. But when you notice where this negligence tends to take place, you might as well call it political science. You can see political science at work when it comes to global warming. Despite near unanimity in the science community, there's now a movement driven by ideology and short-term economics, to ignore the evidence and discredit the reality of climactic change. You can see political science at work with respect to stem cell research. Despite its potential, the federal government has restricted funding for creating new cell lines, putting the burden of any future research squarely on the shoulders of the private sector. Now government's most basic responsibility is the health and welfare of its people. So it has a duty to encourage appropriate scientific investigations that could possibly save the lives of millions.
I think imagination deserves to come back to the forefront of research and concern in psychology and philosophy, and I would say even in neuroscience. It fell out of the picture because of the rise of behaviorism. The mind sort of fell out of the picture because we thought, well, we can only study behaviors of animals and humans, and we can't know what's happening in the mind. So it disappeared. But then when the mind came back during the cognitive revolution, it came back on the model of a computer. So computational mind, of course, very popular and did great things. I mean, thinking of the mind that way has been productive.
But snake bites are still a big concern for much of the world's population. The World Health Organization estimates that about 100,000 people die from poisonous snake bites each year. Many more people become paralyzed or permanently disabled. And in poor rural areas of Asia, Africa, and South America, most deaths from snake bites go unreported. Most victims live too far from clinics that could provide them with antivenom. In Nepal, where more than 10% of bite victims die, an experimental program uses volunteer motorcyclists to save residents. Since the program launched in 2003, only about 0.5% of victims who got a ride died. Researchers are also hard at work developing better tests to detect whether victims have been bitten by a poisonous snake, and in some cases, even detect the species.